Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Tensions are flaring up again in the South China Sea, involving not just the regional players like China and the Philippines, but also countries outside the region like the US and Japan. Last Sunday, joint drills were conducted by the Philippines, US, Japan, and Australia in the disputed area, alongside Chinese patrols. With leaders from the US, Japan, and the Philippines meeting soon in Washington this week, the question arises: what's fueling these tensions, and how likely is a full-blown conflict? Earlier, I spoke to Romeo Van Looy, president of the Philippine Society for International Security Studies, and Professor Huang Jing, director of the Institute of the U.S. and Pacific Studies at Shanghai International Studies University. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue. Romeo, tell us, what is the current situation like in the disputed region? Where are we now?
Well, currently tension is rising, and the risk unintended violent encounter at sea is also getting higher. There is a need to change the current situation. We need to de-escalate the current situation, and we need to calm the situation in the South China Sea, because right now it's really a tense situation, not only for the Philippines but also for the entire region.
Mm-hmm. Well, speak of de-escalation, what we are seeing is a sort of increasing confrontation and also more involvement, even from outside players. For example, there's the first ever joint naval military drills between the four parties. Besides the Philippines, there's the U.S., Australia, and Japan. People would say that's a clear move, targeting China. At the same time, China is having its own annual joint military drills in early April. So people are wondering, what are the possibilities of, say, military accident that could spark a conflict here?
Well, the more you conduct those types of military exercises and other types of military activities without proper coordination among parties concerned, then the possibility of military encounter due to accident or miscalculation is becoming very high. So that is why there's a need to exercise restraint in the conduct of those kinds of military activities, because you're raising the risk of violence, you're raising the risk of unintended violent encounter at sea.
It's beyond the claims of sovereign or interests of different nations. It's also about the great power competition here. Speak of that, obviously Manila and China, they have a clash of interests over the claim of South China Sea. At the same time, the U.S., is not a claimant to the sovereignty or interest of the South China Sea, but it does have a strong interest to contain China or the rise of China. We have seen this Quad or AUKUS, military frameworks. Do you think people are aware of the differences between Manila and Washington in terms of their interests here?
Well, the people is not so much aware of the details of the situation. They are just relying on the Western controlled media information in the Philippines. So their understanding of the situation is really not complete, because they're only relying on the reports controlled by Western media in the Philippines, and that is why there's a strong popular nationalism of Filipinos against China's actions in the South China Sea and welcoming American presence, and that is why I am saying I have been engaging the media to educate our people that the situation is not as simple as that. So, in fact, if you will look at the original intention of the current president right now, Bongbong Marcos, he had the intention of even elevating Philippines-China relations to the higher level, to the higher gear. That was his statement when he visited China. And he even want to implement comprehensive strategic cooperation with China. But suddenly, President Bongbong Marcos changed his approach towards China because of U.S. intervention. And that is why the United States has a lot of things to explain on the escalation of security tension in the South China Sea.
Right. That's also the question, I think hanging around for a lot of, in the mind of a lot of people. At the very beginning, we do see there were, even conditions for the two countries to improve their relationship. All of a sudden, somehow, the South China Sea disputes between two countries, are on the rise, in a sudden manner. And also, if you look at the U.S. involvement, for example, in Ukraine, many people would say that's a proxy war with the purpose to weaken the U.S. rival Russia. And then people would ask if there's a possibility of a replay of a proxy war, say in Asia, through Philippines, or even, sometime people would talk about Taiwan here.
Well, in my view, if there will be a military conflict in Asia involving the United States, whether it is because of Taiwan or because of Korean Peninsula or because of the South China Sea, if the United States will be involved in a military conflict in that part of the region, then definitely the Philippines will be involved as a proxy. That is why I am challenging this increased military presence of the United States in the Philippines, because it will inevitably put the Philippines in a difficult situation. We don't want to be an instrument of U.S. proxy war in Asia. And that's why I oppose the continuing militarization of Philippines American relationship in the context of the South China Sea. We want to delimitarize the issue of the South China Sea, because the South China Sea can be solved peacefully, and it can be managed through non-military means, as long as all parties concerned will be involved in serious dialogues and consultations.
Speak of American involvement, people would list the examples of American, initial strong promise, and then later on, the lack of, a track record, or solid track record to match that kind of promise, as it is happening in Ukraine. U.S. previously said that they will always provide support as long as it's needed, but now there's no support, at least temporary, if not long term. If Trump comes to the White House, obviously the things will change completely, and as it happened in Afghanistan. Do you think people have ever thought about that? Yes, U.S. is saying this, but what will happen if there's a real thing happening there?
That is why we are also speaking up our minds to share the situation that we find ourselves. The Philippines has supported the United States in its various military conflicts in the world. We supported the United States in its war in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in Syria. Now in Ukraine. But look at the outcome of all these military activities in the world. That is why we are saying that we need to stop these kinds of military activities. No to war, yes to peace. Instead of preparing for war, we need to prepare for peace. Instead of strengthening our capability to win a war, we need to strengthen our capability to win the peace. We need peace, because peace is very important for economic development. Without peace, it's very difficult to achieve economic development. And as we have seen in our various experiences in the world, war is always inimical to economic development. War is inimical to human prosperity. That is why we oppose any type of military activities, not only in the Philippines, but also in managing the South China Sea disputes. There are many non-military ways to manage disputes in the South China Sea. Just have to consider all these non-military means. Military options will not do good to the Philippines. It will not do good to the region. It will not do good to the whole world. We need peace rather than war.
Well, that's true. I talked to a colleague from the Philippines. Obviously, he's on the government side. He's supportive of the government to take a strong position against China. I asked him about the U.S. Ultimate, like the policy, whether they are ready for a war with China. And obviously, people would doubt that the will or the determination of Washington. Washington, yes, they have a plan to contain China, but obviously at the same time they want to have avoid a direct war, to confront China. So, do you think the people, despite all this anti-China, nationalistic sentiment, do you think people understand that ultimately the U.S. probably will not join the Philippines, in their words, defend the Philippines against the Chinese here?
That is why we need to raise the awareness of our people. American military involvement in the South China disputes is not beneficial for the Filipino people. We need American assistance in terms of building our capacity to fight terrorism, to fight crimes, and to improve our economic development. But when it comes to military development, strictly speaking, if the truth be known, the Philippines has no threat of any external invasion. No country in the world is threatening to invade the Philippines, not even China. China never had the intention to invade the Philippines for a long, long time. We enjoy the very long history of friendship. And in my study, in my research as a scholar, I have discovered that for more than 1,000 years, more than a millennium, the China has always been a trader to the Philippines and not an invader. And only Western colonial powers invaded the Philippines, Spain, the United States, and even Japan, if we want to include Japan. But China never had the intention of invading the Philippines for a long, long time. And during the ancient period, the South China Sea was not the source of tension between the Filipinos and the Chinese. The South China Sea was the bridge that connected Filipino and Chinese traders, and through this trade they were able to exchange culture, they were able to exchange experiences, and they lived peacefully for a long, long time, okay, until Western colonial powers invaded the Philippines. So China is not an invader of the Philippines. And if you will look at the South China Sea, it is not an issue of invasion. It is an issue of territorial dispute that can be settled. It is an issue of maritime jurisdictional conflict that can be managed. We can negotiate. We can cooperate amidst the South China Sea disputes. So it is very wrong to say that we are being invaded by China. That is why I need to raise the awareness of our people that that is a wrong perspective.
Yeah.
There is no country in the world that has the intention of invading the Philippines.
That's right. A recent statement released by ASEAN, the 10 Southeast Asian countries, they talked about basically, urging the rival claimants to engage in peaceful dialogue. Are we going to see ASEAN play a role in this dispute?
Yes, ASEAN can play a role. ASEAN just needs to remind all its strategic partners like the United States to assert the ASEAN centrality in managing regional security affairs. That's why it's very important for ASEAN to really assert the important role in regional security, its prominent role in maintaining peace and instability, not only in the South China Sea, but in the wider Asia-Pacific region. Unfortunately, American involvement in regional security affairs is undermining and even threatening ASEAN centrality. The involvement of extra-regional powers, like the creation of minilateral arrangements like AUKUS and Quad, they are all undermining ASEAN centrality. And it's time for ASEAN to really speak up and tell the whole world that ASEAN should be central in managing regional security issues in the Asia-Pacific. ASEAN must assert its rightful role in the region.
Yeah, to play a positive role. Thank you, Romel. Thank you for speaking with us. Let's have a short break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome to Dialogue, Professor Huang. U.S. President Joe Biden is to meet with his Japanese and the Philippine counterparts to talk about the economic and defense ties. And then you heard U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell labeling the summit as, quote, unprecedented trilateral engagement. So what does he mean by, unprecedented, such a strong word here?
I think the three, we can take this issue, look at it from three perspectives. Number one is that Japan has never been so, closely involved with Philippines in South China Sea affairs. This is, if my memory serves me right, this is the first time that the Japanese government has been so closely involved in this, and together with the United States, of course. A second, of course, this obviously, as we have seen now, has some military meanings in that, which means the Japanese government will not only work together with Filipinos and Americans on the South China Sea issue, but I believe the so-called self-defense force of Japan will also get involved in the form of military exercise and so on and so forth. Thirdly, of course, this is a time when, we see that we have been seeing a quite stable situation in the region. I mean, stability and peace in the South China Sea has been maintained for quite a few years, despite we have witnessed the lasting warfares in Ukraine and in Middle East. But here, everybody is getting along very well. But now, with such a so-called unprecedented cooperation, quote and unquote, we are going to see some tensions arising in this area, which of course is against everybody's interests, including Filipinos.
Related to that topic, of course, you do see the joint exercises between the Philippines, the U.S., Australia, and Japan in the South China Sea. The Philippine President Marcos said, I quote, basically that will result in less aggression from China. What do you make of these remarks? Less aggression from China?
I think that let's put the situation this way. If we turn the table around, it is not the Philippines or Australians or Americans or Japanese who are doing military exercise. It's China's side, for example, doing a military exercise in South China Sea. Maybe they can see that. But now it's the Philippine side together with the three other countries who are out of this region, who are not involved in this kind of territory dispute at all, coming together, four of them, doing military exercise in South China Sea. I think it's quite ridiculous or ironic. The one who is taking action, who are showing force or showing muscles, try to deter China, saying that China is an aggressive side, which I think maybe that's quite, ridiculous.
Can more military drills like this help reduce, the tension or the chance of conflict?
Quite contrary, a military drill like this will only intensify the situation because it is very provocative. It is provocative not only that in the Philippines is doing this. It's provocative that Philippines together, as I said before, with the three powers from outside the region are doing it together. This is very provocative. I think this is not helpful in terms of stability and peace. Let's imagine a situation that if Philippines, together with Americans, Japanese, and Australians doing military drills like this, maybe China has every right to also do the same thing, or maybe the other countries who have same kind of territory dispute with Philippines, like Vietnam, because the Philippines not only have a territory dispute with China in South China Sea, they also have the same dispute, or even more, with countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and so on and so forth. If all the other countries involved into this territory dispute in South China Sea doing the same as Philippines is doing, we're going to say that everybody is endangered. We're going to say that tension will rise in the region, which, again, like we said, the peace and stability has been maintained for quite a while.
Even during the first year of Marcos, he was in Beijing. The relationship between the two countries looked fine. Of course, the previous government and previous administration during that 5 years, the two countries had successfully managed these disputes. Why all of a sudden there's the tensions? How have we come to this stage of confrontation?
I think that everybody on Earth can see that without Americans' backup, without Americans, so-called support behind the Philippines would not do things like this. This is obviously the United States of America who trying to provoke something here and try to, put China in a kind of situation that will benefit United States, who is trying to outcompete China. This is a part of the American strategy to contain China, to put pressure on China. Of course, Philippines just being used in this case.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know that part of the dispute is this the military vessel which has been parked in the Ren Aijiao in the Chinese name, or the Second Thomas Shaw in as Philippines call it. So every government in Manila has promised to move away this vessel, but somehow it never realized. What's the issue here?
Yeah, the issue here is that the Philippines will put a so-called official military vessel there, and therefore it justified its claim that this is their piece of water or their piece of land. We know that the vessel there is basically has no actual use, because it's a rundown, it's a rotten one, it's one that totally finished. But what I want to point it out, just like you said, this vessel has been there for many, many years, has never been a real issue, and except for Aquino III, which about 10 years ago, he also, like Marcos, tried to use these vessels to stir up something there. But in the previous few years, this vessel has been there, and China, from the humanitarian point of view, has allowed the Philippines to send the food and other necessities for lives over there for a few soldiers that stationed there for quite a long time. But now the problem here is that Philippines trying to reinforce this vessel, use this vessel as a foundation to build up something there to strengthen its claims. Of course, that is a violation not only of China's interests, but also violation of the agreement between two countries. Now, the situation is that Philippines trying to use this vessel to build up something over there, so that to further their claims that this is their piece of land. Of course, China will not and should not allow this happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, in order to basically stop the action of the Philippines, instead of sending, say, food and other necessities to the crews, they are, often sending this construction material to build probably a military outpost in the shore to strengthen their claim. The Chinese side uses, this water cannon, and then the West has been accusing China of using so-called gray zone tactics in dealing with the Philippines. What do you make of that?
Yeah, because we know that situation like this can only be solved or managed through negotiation. But a necessary condition for negotiation is that both sides should maintain status quo. Obviously, Filipinos try to break status quo, trying to make the situation even worse. That's where the tension is. But now, of course, China, to stop it, China uses water cannons. A water cannon basically is a peaceful means, but much better than real cannons, right? And so use water cannons for several reasons. Number one, of course, to show China's determination and resolve that China will not and should not let this happen, first. And second is also China's effort to maintain status quo. China still allows, to this date, the food and water and other necessity of life, just like you pointed out, to this vessel. But China will not and should not allow those building materials, construction materials to the vessel. This is because that, again, will break the status quo. Last but not the least, of course, China understand that it is United States of America who is behind the Philippines. If China fails to hold its ground on this issue, and the other side will itch in, will gradually enlarge its ground, will itch in, and China will have to sacrifice its own interests, and more importantly, maybe will endanger the stability and the peace in the region.
seems like not everybody in Manila is in agreement with the administration. For example, Imee Marcos, sister of President Marcos, has voiced her disagreement with her brother's recent move in handling these disputes, saying that it's leading the country down a dangerous path. She said, I quote here, "Emotion rather than reason has prevailed in our maritime conflict with China and is leading us down a dangerous path that will cost us more than just a Filipino pride." What are your thoughts on this?
I think I absolutely agree with Ms. Marcos on this issue because indeed her brother is not just emotional, but I don't think he's in good willingness, in good faith of doing this, because obviously the way he's doing this is, again, like his sister said, is taken down to the road of conflict and confrontation. If that takes place, it serves no one's interest but the interest of its power outside this region, because United States want to take advantage of this issue for its own interests. And moreover, I think what his sister did not say but clearly implied here is that Marcos is being used to work not for Filipinos' interests, but for interests of United States in vis-a-vis China. That is, try to contain China or deter China. And the last but not the least, we know that South China Sea issue involved not just Philippines and China, but also other countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, and on the so-called territory disputes. And the Philippines is the only one who tried to stir up or put up a kind of conflict on this issue, which is quite odd. And that will make Philippines not only against China's interests, but against the interests of the entire region of all the ASEAN member countries, because ASEAN member countries has put it very clearly, every one of them, except Philippines, that ASEAN will not excite in the so-called competition between United States and China. Now Philippines is not only taking side, and Philippines try to be a kind of crown, like a pawn for Americans in this issue, which is really, in Americans' term, it's really a troublemaker.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell us more about that. Some Filipino officials, they cite this mutual defense treaty, thinking that the U.S. will come to their defense in the worst scenario. First of all, are the U.S. ready for, say, direct contact with the Chinese side in a military conflict?
I think that, frankly, I don't know, but I doubt very much that if some conflict really happened between Filipinos and China, and the United States will really get involved. And we have a situation before. We know that in 2013, 14, 15, and 16, when the situation quite tense, again, because the United States takes South China Sea issue as a handle to get on China. At that time, the tensions there, but we know that eventually the United States did not get involved anyway. And on this issue, I think the United States, again, just want to take advantage of the tension it pushed Philippines to create. But if there's tension there, if there's a conflict there, I think that if previous history can teach us any lesson, that is, United States at the best will do some proxy conflicts here rather than get involved itself.
Thank you, Professor Huang. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
With that, we come to the end for today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.